My guest this week is Helen Heggie. Helen has a master's degree in engineering from the University of Cambridge and has worked in various STEM roles. Most recently, she is a managing director of STEMFIRST Ltd, and she's also worked as a STEM consultant for the BBC. Helen, welcome to STEM with Mr. N.
Thank you, Stuart. It's lovely to be here.
So what does your day-to-day role as the managing director of STEMFIRST Ltd involve? And in fact, what do STEMFIRST Ltd do?
So STEMFIRST, we are an educational consultancy, and the clue is in the title. It's all to do with science, technology, engineering and maths. And we basically get involved in lots of opportunities to shout about the wonderful world of STEM and to engage with adults, children, employers, etc., to inspire them about the opportunities involved. So what does my day look like? That's a difficult question, to be honest, Stuart. Every day is very, very different. And even more different, obviously, during the pandemic. Before the pandemic, I would be out meeting employers, talking to students, delivering teacher training, working with funders. But now we're all virtual. So a lot of my day is spent on Zoom or on Teams, talking to all those partners, those teachers, those pupils. And as I say, engaging with people around STEM.
So, as I said in the introduction, you've worked in a range of STEM careers, and you've said there that you work with a range of different STEM industries to help inspire young people looking at STEM careers and helping teachers. But I'm curious, how did you get interested in STEM?
So I've always loved science and technology and problem solving. I've always been very good at breaking things. I think I've always been quite curious, and I loved science at school. But I didn't actually ever consider engineering. But when I was in sixth form in old language, year 12, year 13, I had a chemistry teacher who sent me on an insight into engineering course up at Newcastle University for a week. And I absolutely loved it. And that really inspired me to then apply to university to read engineering. And I always say to people sort of jokingly that choosing engineering was a bit of a lazy choice because I didn't have to pick what specific type of science that I wanted to read at university. I knew I wanted to go to university, but by doing engineering, I could do all of it: chemistry, physics, the maths. I didn't have to choose.
It's funny, I've spoken to a couple of engineers so far doing these interviews, and everyone that's been an engineer says the exact same thing. They were good at breaking things. But another common theme coming through is that it was quite often a teacher that has nudged somebody in the STEM direction. So with that in mind, with a teacher steering in that direction, and at the time you were doing it, I imagine that there probably weren't that many females looking into engineering. Would I be right in believing that?
No, absolutely. There weren't very many women. But to be honest, looking back, Stuart, it didn't bother me. And I actually didn't really see it as odd. So I am an only daughter of a father that ran a haulage business. So I was always around men and trucks and engineering. So for me, it's sort of in the blood. And it's ironic that I've just told you that it was a teacher that inspired me, whereas actually I probably had an environment that was quite mechanically minded anyway. But it was the school influence that obviously sent me down that path. But there weren't very many women. I read engineering at Cambridge University, as you said in the introduction, and the way that engineering works there is that you do a general engineering degree, so everybody has the same lectures together, so you don't choose mechanical or electrical or structural, you're all together in the first year. And there weren't very many of us. And you know, things have improved since then, not as much as we would like, but things certainly have improved. But to a certain extent, it's always been a bit of an advantage because people tend to remember me, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I see it as an advantage. And you know, you stood out from the crowd, and it gave me certainly opportunities. You know, throughout my career, but I've never really seen it as something that's particularly odd. You know, I'm quite happy to get stuck in anywhere.
Well, it is good to hear though that the landscape is changing, because that's been the sort of ongoing push with the STEM education, is to try and get more females into STEM. So it's good that you're out there and visible as a female working in STEM and with engineering. So on the point of engineering there and inspiring people to get into STEM, I have read that STEMFIRST have the book that you wrote about engineering fairy tales to try and inspire this interest in engineering. Could you tell us a bit about the Engineering Fairytales book, how it came about and what its aims are?
So as I said, STEMFIRST, we get involved in lots of things to do with STEM. For many, many years, we've been running for about 11 years now. And the core of our work is around something called the STEM Ambassador Programme, which is a central government funded volunteering programme to encourage employers to link with schools around the STEM agenda. And we've been running that, as I said, for the Lancashire and Cumbria area. It is a STEM Ambassador Programme, is a national UK-wide programme. And what I noticed through working with that programme is that there was very few quality STEM activities for primary school that linked to the real world. There were some great STEM activities for primary, but not an awful lot that necessarily linked to careers, employers, of what engineers and scientists actually do. So I've written a resource, or I wrote a resource probably about 3 years ago now, called Engineering Fairytales, which can be delivered to 3-year-olds all the way through to Key Stage 3. And it is based around 8 traditional tales. And I've rewritten each of the traditional tales so that the fairy tale character has a STEM problem that needs solving. And then the idea is that the students will work in a team as engineers and scientists to design and develop a contraption or a solution to the problem that that fairy tale character has. And we've written a book. I've delivered CPD training to probably about 500 primary school teachers now. It's rolled out across the country. We've been very privileged to receive funding from BAE Systems, who enabled me to record our STEM Ambassador volunteers reading the fairy tales. So that is a free resource that is online. And I'm just trying to find a publishing deal, Stuart, to get the books actually made. So if you've got any contacts out there that are listening, it is an amazing resource, and we'd like some help. A bit of a plug at the same time.
No, that's perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with a bit of a plug. I was actually going to ask, when you're saying about bits of the resource being available online, where online would we find it? What website would we find?
The actual stories themselves are on YouTube, but if you Google and search for BAE Systems Engineering Fairytales, they should all come up. There's a home learning link at BAE on their early careers website, and what you will find are the videos of the stories being read. You will also find the activity sheets, which set the context, give you some background about why STEM and engineering is important, and also gives you some questions you could ask the students, and also appropriate follow-on activities. And then there are also examples of solutions. So if people are feeling that they need a little bit of help to put together a contraption, then there are some suggestions as well. But I wouldn't suggest you look at that as a first port of call. You know, creativity is what matters, and no solution is the right solution. So just explore some wild and wacky ideas. And as I said, my model has been to train the teachers, so train the trainer, because I think it's really important that we don't burden teachers with additional things to do. So this resource is something that already links to traditional tales, which is in the primary curriculum, and it helps them be creative with those traditional tales. So you can pull out literacy strands, mathematics strands, and then there's also those skills. There's teamwork, creativity, art and design, as well as the science and the technology. So it's a really nice all-round cross-curricular project.
It sounds like a terrific resource, and I'm glad now that everybody knows where they can find it and get access to it. And as Helen said, if there's any publishers out there, get in touch and get the books published and put out there. And that's a good point now to follow on to another piece of work that you've been doing, producing STEM education I've forgotten the word that I was going to use.
Resources.
Resources. That's the one. STEM education resources for children, and that's your work with the BBC. Could you tell us a bit about what you've been involved in consulting with the BBC?
Absolutely. So my sort of career journey has been sort of quite long and a very sort of creative path, to be honest, because as you said, I went to Cambridge University, I studied engineering, I graduated, I then went and worked for Ford Motor Company for many years as a research and design engineer, and then I left and did a primary teaching certificate. And that has sort of led me down a path that I didn't quite realise engineering could take me. So I was approached by the BBC, or approached by CBeebies, and they had a concept called Bits and Bob, which was going to be a show about a young female engineer. And what they wanted was a STEM consultant or an engineer to work with them, to lead them through understanding how engineers think, how they work in teams, and then to effectively write a show curriculum and approve scripts for quite a significant series. So hopefully quite a few of your listeners will have come across the Bits and Bob programme. It's on CBeebies, it's on iPlayer, and there are lots of episodes that effectively you can use with little ones, so 3-year-olds onwards, doing hands-on STEM challenges.
So you'd mentioned earlier with the work that STEMFIRST does that you work a lot with the STEM ambassadors. Could you tell us a bit more about what the STEM Ambassador Programme is?
So the STEM Ambassador Programme is a government-funded programme. It's a national programme where we recruit volunteers from industry who are passionate about science, technology, engineering and maths. And they could actually come from any form of STEM background. And then we link them to schools, young people, teachers, to effectively tell their story and to do STEM activity. So interaction, they could judge they could be friendly dragons, judging a competition, but it's about inspiring young people and allowing young people to see that engineers, scientists, mathematicians and STEM professionals are just like them. But our STEM professionals come from loads of different career journeys, and a lot of what I say to people is, if you have a passion about STEM, you can be a STEM ambassador. You don't have to be an engineer. You don't have to be, a technologist. You need to have some passion around STEM. And certainly our big STEM employers, they don't just employ engineers. So for example, Siemens, BAE Systems, United Utilities, they don't just have engineers, they have a real mix of skills and different job roles. And that's what STEM ambassadors are about. They're about illustrating young people all those varied, amazing job roles that are within the world of science, technology, engineering and math.
Another question there about children just now who are interested in STEM. Maybe they've seen the Engineering Fairytales or seen Bits and Bob or done things in class and they're starting to get interested in STEM a bit more. Have you got any advice for how they can continue to nourish that interest, or best ways to pursue it forward to lead them more down a STEM path towards STEM careers?
I think it depends what age group of young people we're talking about, to be honest, Stuart. I think if we're talking about little ones, and as we've talked, it's quite obvious I've done quite a lot of work with little ones, but I've also done a lot of work with older learners and adult learners as well. But if we look at the little ones, a lot of research shows that young people make their minds up about the type of people that do certain STEM jobs by the age of 5, between 5 and 7. So we really need to be nurturing the little ones and their support, their carers, their parents, so that they understand the importance of STEM. So if you're talking about little ones, what we need to do is encourage them to be hands-on, to explore, to put down those tablets and to get stuck into, the cardboard and the creativity and actually do some crafty type problem solving with a purpose. We also need to illustrate to those carers, the potential, how STEM is everywhere in our world, and how it's really important to encourage young people to be confident about science and technology and maths. and to understand that actually it's applicable to our world, whether it be the food we eat, the clothes we wear, the transport we travel in, everything, it's everywhere. But if I'm talking to older learners, I would say what you need to do is keep your options open. So you need to continue studying your STEM subjects, certainly past 16, because even if you don't want to go into STEM, a lot of employers really value STEM skills. So, keep your STEM study high because it gives you transferable skills for lots of different careers. I'd also say talk to people, talk to as many scientists and engineers as you possibly can, because then you can hear all their stories. People will say to me, well, what is engineering? Well, what is engineering? It's massive. So you can't just talk to one person about it and get a true impression. You need to talk to as many people as possible, which is why the nation-wide or national STEM ambassador program is so beneficial. So teachers can get involved by logging on to www.stem.org.uk and requesting volunteers to talk to their young people, as can uniform group leaders and youth leaders. They can all use the STEM Ambassador Programme. For other young people, I would say think about what else you might be interested in extracurricular. Think about talking to school to see if they're going to run a STEM club, or do a little bit of stuff outside of school that might lead you into finding out a bit more about engineering, etc. There are courses that you can go on, summer schools like I did when I did my week at Newcastle University. The Engineering Development Trust is a great place to have a look. Small Piece Trust. So have a look online, and if you want to look at case studies, there's loads of videos out there as well. So again, the Institute of Engineering Technology, the IET, and there's a government website called This Is Engineering. There's loads of resources. So just have a play and find out what interests you.
Again, lots of great resources and places to look for information, and I found it very interesting there as well when you said about engineering not just being one thing, because you do talk about it when you say STEM and you say engineering, but then I've spoken to renewable energy engineers. My brother is an aircraft engineer, so fixes engines. You get engineers in the oil rigs. You were of course doing your research and development engineering with Ford, so motor cars. So that even just in this one chat there, we've covered a few different strands of engineering. So it's great that you've got these resources there that you can tell us about, where they can go and find out about.
And I think just one thing to make clear as well, we don't just make stuff. STEM professionals don't just make stuff. What we actually do is we solve problems. So that has been very evident during the pandemic. We've had engineering companies downing tools and shifting their attention to create new versions of ventilators. And, there's all the logistics around the vaccination, not only designing the vaccine, but actually packaging it up and facilitating the rollout and the packaging and the quality control and all of that. And we need STEM professionals for everything like that. I think young people are very passionate about the environment. And again, it's only engineers and scientists that will be able to solve those problems in the future. How do we find more green technology? How do we push towards carbon net zero? How can we improve this sort of throwaway culture by making things that we can use far more effectively? So it is everywhere. It's not just planes, trains and automobiles, and that we really need to get that message through to young people and everybody. And I always, I've been interviewed a few times about this. I always say, it's everybody's responsibility. It's teachers' responsibility. It's parents' responsibility. It's employers' responsibility to understand that we need to educate a generation to understand how the curriculum links to the real world and how they can shape their own futures by studying science, technology, engineering and maths.
Yep, I 100% agree, and it's something I've said to a lot of my students as well, is about the creative thinking aspects of STEM is the main thing to develop. So even when you're doing challenges in the classroom and you have them building things like building bridges, it's not always about the outcome, it's about that creative thinking process. So it was nice to hear that coming from somebody who is a STEM professional saying that is what is looked for. Helen,
absolutely.
I think that covers everything. It's been very, very interesting hearing about what you do with STEM First. Make sure and check out the Engineering Fairytales and check out Bits and Bob to find out more about engineering and for young people, and resources that Helen has been involved in. Helen, thank you very much for joining us. It's been very interesting, and we wish you well with getting your publisher for your Engineering Fairytales.
Thank you very much. And just to add as well, anybody can use STEM ambassadors. So go to www.stem.org.uk and get some volunteers in front of your young people to tell them their own individual stories.